Okay, so today we're going to do something a little different. We're not just going to talk about history. We're going to build step by step a top-tier plan for a history essay. And our subject is the fascinating and, well, ultimately doomed 30 years peace between Athens and Sparta. By the end of this, you'll have a complete framework to absolutely nail any essay on it. Let's dive in. All right, here it is, the big question. This is the classic how far type of question that teachers and examiners just love. Why? Because it's not asking for a list of facts. It's asking for your judgment, a really nuanced argument. This is the puzzle we're going to solve together. And trust me, you'll walk away with a rock-solid plan to answer it. And here's our game plan for today. Super simple. First, we'll break down what the question is really asking. Then we'll build the two sides of our argument. The case for success and then the case for failure. After that, we'll look at how to use your ancient sources like a real historian. And finally, we'll pull it all together to craft that killer final judgment. Right. First things first. Before we can even begin to answer how far the piece worked, we need to be crystal clear on what problems it was trying to solve in the first place. What exactly were the issues of the First Peloponnesian War? Well, this thing wasn't some short, clean conflict. It was a messy, sprawling, 15-year-long struggle. You had allies flipping sides, Athens suddenly building this massive land empire, and then, just as suddenly, losing it all at the Battle of Chaeronea. The really crucial thing to get here is that the war didn't end with a knockout punch. It ended in total mutual exhaustion. Both sides were just done, and they were ready for a deal. So what did this peace treaty actually say? Well, it had a few key parts. First, Athens had to give up that land empire it had grabbed. But, and this is a big but, each side got to keep the allies they already had. This basically freezes the board, creating a clear balance of power. They also threw in a rule about neutral states, and most importantly, this really innovative clause about handling future fights through arbitration. These facts, they're the foundation for our entire essay. Okay, let's build the first half of our argument. How was this treaty actually a success? Where did it genuinely get things right and tackle the problems that had fueled this long, bloody war? So this is a massive point. You have to understand, for the very first time, Sparta, the ultimate land power of Greece, officially recognized Athens' empire at sea. By agreeing to that alliance freeze, Sparta was basically saying, all right, fine, you can keep your Delian League, the Aegean Sea, it's yours. For Sparta, this was a huge and frankly, a very realistic concession. And the best part is, we don't just have to say that, we can prove it. We've got it straight from the horse's mouth, the historian Thucydides. He basically quotes Pericles summing up the terms of the deal. As you can see, he says it plain as day. The Athenians were to keep the allies they had. This is exactly how you anchor your arguments in the actual evidence. It's a game changer. The treaty also worked on a really practical level. Remember that land empire Athens got a bit too ambitious with? That was a huge source of conflict. The peace deals with it directly. Athens, you have to hand back places like Pegae and Achaea. It basically forced Athens to accept that its power was at sea, not on land, and that ended a really dangerous period of overreach. And this might be the most forward-thinking part of the whole treaty. The arbitration clause was a genuinely brilliant idea. The concept that states, instead of just immediately going to war, should settle their disagreements with a neutral third party. That was revolutionary for its time. In theory, it gave both sides a clear, peaceful way out of future conflicts. So, looking pretty good for the treaty so far, right? Yeah. Well, not so fast, because as we all know, the 30 years peace barely made it to 15. So now, we have to pivot. We have to build the other side of our argument. Why was this treaty, despite all its clever clauses, ultimately a failure? What were the deep, rotten issues that it just couldn't fix? If you take one thing away from this whole explainer, make it this. The peace treaty was fantastic at treating the symptoms of the war, things like fighting over specific bits of land, but it was completely powerless to cure the disease. And that disease was Sparta's deep, gnawing fear of Athens' unstoppable growth. You could sign 1,000 treaties, but that fundamental power struggle, that fear and mistrust, that wasn't going anywhere. And here's the thing. Our main source, Thucydides, tells us this directly. This quote right here, this is basically his entire thesis for the whole Peloponnesian War. He argues that all the little squabbles were just excuses. The real cause, the truest cause as he puts it, was this basic structural fear. For your essay, this quote is absolute gold. So what about that brilliant arbitration clause we were just talking about? Well, here's the kicker. A tool is useless if nobody ever picks it up. When tensions started to ramp up again in the 430s, Sparta never even tried to use it. And this just shows you, a legal system for peace means absolutely nothing if you don't have the political will to actually use it. And if you want the smoking gun, here it is. Years later, deep in the middle of the next war, Thucydides tells us that the Spartans themselves admitted they were wrong. They actually acknowledged that they should have gone to arbitration, like Athens asked. This is just devastating evidence. It's basically a confession, recorded by our star witness, that they were the ones who failed to uphold the treaty's most important part. And on top of all that, there were other serious flaws. That clause about neutral states? It backfired, big time, when the powerful navy of Corcyra decided to join Athens. And what about Sparta's key ally, Corinth? Their intense hatred of Athens was just ignored by the treaty, leaving them free to push for war. The peace really just papered over way too many cracks. So, we've got our arguments for both sides, but to really push your essay into that top grade bracket, you have to show that you can think critically about the evidence itself. And that means we need to talk about our main man, Thucydides. Look, Thucydides is an incredible source. His strengths are obvious. He was alive when this stuff was happening, he has this amazing analytical mind, and he really values eyewitness accounts. But we also have to be critical. He was just a kid when the peace was signed, so his info is secondhand. We also have to piece together the treaty's terms from different parts of his book, and you can tell he really admires the Athenian leader Pericles, which might affect his perspective. Mentioning both the good and the bad shows real historical skill. It's also a really good idea to show that historians are still arguing about this stuff today. You've got guys like to say Craw, who put all the blame on Spartan politics. Then there's Kagan, who thinks war wasn't a sure thing and that Pericles made some bad calls. And then Cockwell, who thinks Thucydides basically nailed it. You don't need to be an expert, but just showing there's a debate is a really high-level move. Okay, so how do we wrap all of this up into a conclusion? We've looked at the pros, we've looked at the cons, we've even critiqued our main source. Now it's time to deliver that final, balanced judgment that the question is asking for. Here's a clear, powerful way to put it. The 30 Years' Peace was a really smart, rational attempt to solve the specific problems that came out of the First Peloponnesian War. It fixed border disputes and it stabilized the power dynamic. But, and this is the whole point, it was completely powerless against the deeper, structural forces of fear and rivalry that Thucydides so brilliantly identified. So when you write that final paragraph, think of it like this. First, acknowledge the treaty's successes. Give it credit where credit is due. It did achieve some things. But then pivot to its much bigger failures. This is where you bring in Thucydides' truest cause as your analytical sledgehammer. Follow these steps and you'll end up with a final judgment that feels earned, powerful, and totally backed up by the evidence. And that's really what it all boils down to, isn't it? The treaty could draw lines on a map and define alliances, but it couldn't write a law against fear. It couldn't legislate away ambition. It created the rules for peace, but it couldn't create the will for peace. So I'll leave you with this thought. Was Thucydides right? Given the raw power of Athens and the deep-seated fear in Sparta, could any piece of paper have ever truly stopped what was coming?